Okay, so to begin, I want to start with the writing process. So before this class, I would always just stick to a 5-point essay, which, for example, a 5-point essay is just made up of an introduction, and then the body paragraphs are all made up of quotations from your sources and just like explaining what the quotations mean. So what I learned in this semester is how to use a research paper template instead. This, for example, the essay that you see on the screen right now is my old essay. Like the first time I tried writing this, I wrote it in a 5-point essay style. So as you can see, it's just like in the pink right here, you can see how I'm first just introducing my source. The green is just saying is a quote from the source, and then the yellow is just explaining what the quote means. And after that, it's like the exact same thing. It's just repeating. It's just a quote and then the explanation and nothing else. And instead, like this year, what I used, which was the research paper template, I was able to learn to not just add like the quote and the explanation, but also add your own personal experience at the end to help tie it all together. So for how it works, like a research paper template helps present your research in a way that makes it flow easier. You first present what you have found and what flaws you found in your research, and then you provide the reader with the data you collected to help back up your claim and how to improve this research. And then I applied it by like changing my old essay format to the new research format. So this is kind of challenging because at first, like I said, I was really used to just using a 5-point essay format. So I had never used this type of template before. So it was kind of difficult to like integrate it. So what helped me like transition a lot was the easy essay checklist, which was provided by my professor, and it really helped like provide. This is the easy essay checklist. It helped like helped me show me how to write this paper using the research paper template. And as you can see, like you introduce your sources, you name your authors with citations as like MLA style. After each quote, you explain the quotation, but you dumb it down for your readers. You don't just repeat what the quote says. And then after the quote, you provide an explanation for the quote. And then you provide an explanation, and then you add your own experience also to help support or refute the quote. And then also, like what really helps about this new template is that it separates your secondary and primary research to like help the flow of the essay and make it easier to read. It also helps build up, like you start off with your secondary sources and then you see what is wrong with them. So it leads up to your claim, to your primary sources, and then your claim, like explaining why your claim is important and why it should be acknowledged. So yeah, after using this, like I said, it became much clearer, and my essay was a lot more clear and organized, and yeah, so to conclude, like I will not, like after learning about this, I'll be able to apply this template to my future research assignments, and it will help convey my findings in a more organized manner that helps build up my claim. So the next question I want to answer is the research process. So before this class, I would usually just look up any article on Google that was relevant to my paper in the slightest, and then use that to write my essay. So I would just go on Google, look up my topic, and just click on any of the first links that I could find, like just so I can get it over with and just find like sources. But in this class instead, like I learned, first thing I learned is how to look for credible online sources with the library's online database. So UTRGV provides online databases, an online database that has a bunch of resources for like its students. And so you search the database with keywords. So for example, my topic was on psychedelic drugs. So I just look up psychedelics. And then I get a bunch of documents all relating to psychedelics. But as you can see, like they're all about psychedelics, but my topic was how research is conducted on psychedelics and how like they affect mental health. So you can also, it's to like make it to refine your search, you can also add more keywords. So I can add like mental health, and it helps narrow down a lot more compared to others. And also you can click on this sidebar to the left. You can also like help refine it even further by just like choosing any of these content types or anything like publication date, the discipline. What I did, I chose for content type, I chose the journal article because that's what I needed. Like I needed something like scientific and like approved. So yeah, like I could just choose this and I could use this for my essay. And yeah, it's really easy to access, and all of these documents have already been approved by like the university, so it's really like helpful, and you know you're getting like a good source. So I applied it by like I used this database to look up sources instead of just rely on Google. The challenges I faced, like at first, like I said, it's hard to find documents that I could use in my research within the database but after using more keywords and the sidebar to refine my search, I was able to find more valuable sources. And after using this, like I was able to find sources I could trust in because they had been approved by my own university, which helped improve my credibility, the credibility of my writing, because I was using appropriate sources. And using this database also helped me ease the citing of my sources because most of all the sources I found on here had a lot of the information I could use in my works cited page. So it's like compared to other sources which you can just find on Google, sometimes it's hard to find like all the information you need to cite the source. And in these, like it's really easy to find. And the second thing I learned about research is how to check for the credibility of my sources. And for example, like we use crap sheets in this, in my class. And crap sheets, it stands for the currency, relevance, accuracy, accuracy, authority, and purpose of your source. So you can use the crap sheets, which, like I said, it stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose to test the credibility of your source you want to use. You go through each section and fill in the questions, and after filling them out, you will be able to reflect on whether the source is credible enough to use. So you fill out the questions in each section. Like for example, here you can say when the information was published or posted, and you can just find this on your source and write everything down. And also seeing like how if you have a bunch of blank spaces, it kind of shows that your source is not really well cited or it does not provide enough information. So that really helps you avoid those sources. And yeah, so currency, just check like if the information is still if it's still worth something, even though like if it's relevant to the times, or like let's just say if it's really old, like this one, it's April 1999. Yeah. You can see how like this would be much more like it would be more preferred because it's more current and it's more like because a lot of things have changed throughout the years, especially with this topic about psychedelics and how they're being like researched and stuff. So yeah, like with currency, you can check like if it's up to date and if it's current. With relevance, you can check if it's even relevant to your topic. So you don't just waste time like using a source and you end up finding out it's not even relevant to what you want to write about. Authority, you check the authors of your source, and then you check whether they're credible to write about what they're like writing about. So you can check you check their credentials. Like for example, for this one, it was a lab report, so it was a lot of like medical doctors and people with PhDs and stuff. And then another important thing is what type of website it was found in. Because a lot of .com websites, for example, are like commercially based, so they're just trying to sell you stuff, or they're just trying to get views. And also if they provide a way to reach them. And then accuracy, to see if how accurate the information is, and then purpose, to see what the purpose of writing their information was for, because a lot of information can be biased, and it can also just be propaganda and stuff. So yeah, I filled in all the questions. So like I applied this to my research by like filling in all the questions on the crap sheet, and then had another peer rate them in class using a rubric to test the credibility of them herself. So we had a thing in class where we each brought in like 4 crap sheets, and then we would trade with another person and we would rate each other, and we would try to get like the highest score, and the highest score meant that your sources were credible. So it really pushed us to try to find like credible sources that we could definitely use for our research. But for challenges, like it was difficult to find all the information at first, and some of my sources did not even provide some of the necessary information. But this ultimately helped me find better sources by making me look for better ones. For impact, this tool helped me make sure that I had credible sources that will help my argument and that were appropriate for my target audience, which is other researchers. So to conclude the research question, I will be able to use the database later on in like my future like career as a student. I'll be able to use this database to look for credible sources, and then the crap sheets I can implement those into my other sources to check the credibility of them, even if they don't like pertain to this class. I can use them for like any class, just to make sure they're not biased or outdated, like for example. Okay, and the next question I want to answer is about secondary sources. So before this class, I would use secondary sources only to support my argument and only provide a redundant explanation like to them. So for this, I decided to, the first thing I learned was how to disagree with secondary sources to help push my claim, which is something I'd never done before. I would just use my secondary sources to help my claim, like that agreed with my claim, so I can use them to push my argument. So I highlighted some of my secondary sources. Okay, sorry about that. For my secondary sources, I highlighted my research paper right here in green, which is where I talked about like a scale that researchers use in like the research for psychedelics. They usually use a scale called the Hospital Anxiety and Depression Scale, which is like it's made up of 14 questions, and I talked about how in order to like disagree with this question, I decided to like as my easy essay checklist says, I decided to use my own personal experience. So I believe that despite like I wrote, despite being used as a way to make sure that the subjects they had chosen for the experiment were suitable to participate, I believe that this is that it is very difficult to measure an individual's emotion and current state of mind with a scale that is made up of just 14 questions. The human mind is much more complicated than that, and so it is very difficult to pinpoint. And here I provided my own personal experience. Like, as someone who suffers from both anxiety and depression, I can definitely say that the amount of discomfort I experience can vary wildly from day to day, so it is very difficult to get a definite estimate. So how I showed how it works is that you argue against the quotation you provided from your source to prove that why your claim is necessary to improve your topic of research. In this example, I was trying to push for researchers who are researching psychedelics to try to implement personal accounts into their subjects, so they can keep a journal about the experience they're going through. So this really helped my claim. So I applied it like I said, I found quotations in my secondary sources that I disagree with, and then provided a personal experience to refute what they were saying to help further my point. It was kind of difficult at first to disagree with my secondary sources because I had grown accustomed to only using them to agree with my argument, before, like I said, because I would use the authority they provided. For example, here, it was written by a bunch of scientists, so if I had agreed with what they were saying, it would help me a lot because they had a lot of credibility, as they all had PhDs and MDs, and they were just really professional. I overcame this fear of arguing against my secondary sources by seeing the flaws in the work of my sources, and that pushed me to improve it, and to do that I had to disagree with how they were doing it. Sorry about that. I overcame this by seeing the flaws in the work of my sources, and that pushed me to improve it. And to do that, I had to disagree with how they were doing it. So basically, I had to disagree with the way they were conducting the research because I saw a flaw within it, even though they were really credible, like I said, and they had a lot of authority in the field. I saw a flaw, so I needed to point it out. So this impacted my essay because by arguing against my sources helped build my credibility within my essay because it showed the vulnerability of my sources and how improvement is necessary. The second thing I learned is that for secondary sources is that providing a personal experience can help explain your stance on the quotation that you used. So, for example, right here I provided another personal experience, like the one above that I just showed, and it says from personal experience, although being in very different situations, I have found that having someone to converse with or being able to write down my thoughts has helped tremendously when trying to work out my emotions. And this is all in context of the researchers were using LSD to help reduce the anxiety of participants who had terminal diseases. So I thought in order to help further reduce this anxiety and also help provide more information to the research, it would be important. It would be a good idea to provide them with journals to write down what their experience was like, to learn more about the mechanisms of the drugs and how it is that they affect the people and how they can change such a drastic level of anxiety on someone who's faced with terminal diseases, which is pretty tough. So I applied it. I used these personal experiences to refute some of my sources that I disagree with in my essay, and I also used them to agree with my sources that agreed with my own claim. To challenges that I like overcame, because half of my secondary sources were lab reports, which were written in a very professional way. It was hard to find quotes that I could disagree with because of the authority that the scientists had wrote them. Because of the authority that scientists that wrote them had. Sorry. So yeah, it's like the same thing as I said above. Like it was kind of difficult to disagree with scientists because of the authority that they have. But with personal experience, it helped drive my argument within my essay, and also showed my readers that I had a reason to talk about the subject. So that's another very important thing, is with personal experience, you kind of show that you have your own experience with the topic, so you're not just talking about it blindly, not knowing anything about it or never having experienced anything about it. And then the third thing I learned was that dumbing down quotations or simplifying them after using them can help your audience understand the information they provide. So, for example, up here, when I was talking about the scale, a lot of people would not be able to know what the scale is just by like the acronym, which is HADS or HADS. So I decided to explain like this scale is made up of 14 items, of which 7 correspond to anxiety, while the remaining 7 correspond to depression. Each item on the questionnaire is scored from 0 to 3, and that means that an individual can score between 0 and 21 on either the anxiety or the depression scale. So I feel like this really helped clear up like what the scale was, instead of just continuing with the essay and not explaining. So yeah, after each quotation, I provided a brief but clear explanation about what the quote said. It had to be brief because you also don't want to overwhelm your reader with too much information. So they kind of like, they get overwhelmed and they can't store too much information, like especially about like a new topic. So this is also challenging. Some of my secondary sources use various medical terms, so I had to learn their meaning in order to be able to provide a clear explanation of the information they were trying to get across. So yeah, like I would have to look up a lot of the things I read, because since they were like lab reports, they had a bunch of different terms that I did not know. But this also kind of helped me learn more about my topic. So the impact it had on my writing, like by simplifying the quotations, my essay improved because it helped provide a better understanding to my audience. It also helped my credibility by showing that I knew what I was talking about. So also like by learning about my topic, I was able to get more credibility. So as the reader is reading my essay, they're able to see that I know about my topic. I'm not just quoting and redundantly like explaining the quotation, like basically saying the same thing the quote says, so it doesn't even provide any information. So yeah, to conclude with secondary sources, after arguing against my own source, I found that it is a very valuable tactic to use to help further my argument within my essay, because it helps you build your own credibility instead of relying on that of your sources. By using personal accounts, I can now use personal experiences to help drive my argument by disagreeing with sources I believe to be wrong so for personal experiences, I can use them to disagree with the sources I believe to be wrong, but I can also use them to like agree with sources to help reinforce my claim. And then for simplifying or dumbing down the quotation, I will also be able to use the simplifying of my quotes in my future research or essays to make sure that my readers will be able to understand what I am saying. It would also force me to make sure that I myself understand the information that I'm using. So it would really help me like make sure that I know what I'm talking about, so I know that I have like authority, or at least a good foundation and about what I'm talking about. And for the last question I want to talk about was the feedback question. So before this class, like feedback was just focused on grammatical errors, and papers were just like handed over to your peers with no direction at all. First thing I learned was that feedback doesn't have to always be about grammatical errors. So I provided feedback for one of my peers in class. Her name is Galilea, and she asked for feedback. Like, for example, here she asked about like whether this could be considered her claim, and also whether like the position of her claim was affected. So I wrote, yes, that is your claim because you present the reason why you are writing your essay. I also think that placing the claim at the end is a good strategy to prepare your readers for what is to come in your essay, and also works as a good concluding statement for your introduction. So, how it works basically is like feedback can be about the actual content of the essay instead of just being about how it is grammatically written. So by giving feedback about like the actual content instead of just the grammatical makeup, you can really help out the person like make sure that their essay is correct and make sure that it flows well and that it all makes sense. Another example of feedback that I gave Galilea was right here. She says, I have trouble explaining the quotes in research papers. When you find information from secondary sources, how do you use it for your own research papers? So I replied, when trying to incorporate a quote into my essay, I try to make sure that it blends into the surrounding sentences so that it does not seem to come out of nowhere. After placing the quote, it is good to summarize what is in the quote using layman terms in order to help the reader understand it by using common words that they would normally understand. Especially if the quote contains a specific word that is only known to those who know about the topic you're writing about. So here I use like an example from my own essay. Like I said, there was a lot of medical terms I did not know about. So I thought it was really important to, even if it's not medical terms, there's like specific terms that only like certain professionals of different fields use. So a lot of the common public, they wouldn't really know what it means unless they were in that profession. So it's good to explain what they mean. So I applied this like by the challenges I faced is it is difficult to provide feedback on this topic, on a topic that is more open to interpretation, unlike grammatical feedback, which is already set in stone. To overcome this, I compared my peers' feedback to my own, as well as the easy essay checklist to make sure that the information I provided was useful. And then after learning this, the impact it had on my paper is the feedback I received was not about grammar, so it helped to improve the information within my essay. Instead of just trying to make it look pretty or grammatically correct, it actually helped like the contents of my essay and make sure that like my sources were being used correctly, and to make sure like my conclusion made sense, things like that. And then for feedback, the second thing I learned it's that it's better to be specific about what you want and what you're asking for when requesting feedback. So before, like I said, I would usually just blindly like give my peer my paper and not specify what I would want them to look at. So they would just get the paper and then write about whatever they thought like I needed help with, which it's helpful, but I feel like I know my own paper, like I've proofread it and I know where it feels weak. And also a lot of times they would just do grammatical corrections, which is like I could just use like Microsoft Word to check that. So for this example, I will show my own comments, which I asked for. So for example, right here, I'm talking about my intro and how I decided to split my introduction into 2 separate paragraphs. I was required to include my research question and my claim proposed, which is like my claim, which is what proposed solution to my problem in the introduction. I felt that splitting the research question from the claim helped the flow of the introduction and also helped keep it clean and not just the wall of text. And then I asked, was it effective, or should I keep it all on one paragraph? So basically, like by being specific about what you want feedback on, your reviewer will be able to focus on what you want them to, and they will be able to provide better feedback. So I applied this by like when asking for feedback, I included a section where I was struggling with, and I was trying to be more specific about like the parts that I want them to provide feedback for. I also explained what I have already tried to do. So for example, here I split my intro into 2 different parts because I felt like it was just really long, and it was a really long paragraph, and it looked just really weird. So I decided to like separate my introduction into the first part, which contains the question, the research question, and then the second part, which contains my claim. And toward gestures. Oh yeah, so also by providing like the information about like what you've already tried to do, your peer can be able to see that you already tried that, so they won't provide that as a solution since you already tried it. But they can also check, since you already tried that, they can check what you tried to do and see if it was even effective, or if it just messed up your paper even further. So for this, like the challenges I faced when doing this, it was difficult to pinpoint what I was struggling with in my essay at points because I felt like I was doing them correctly. But to overcome this, I proofread my essay a couple of times and wrote down things I did not feel 100% confident in. And I ended up finding like a lot of things that I definitely needed help in and I felt more vulnerable in. So that really helped. And then the impact it had on my essay, like after receiving my feedback from the Writing Center, the content of my essay improved because I was given a second opinion on it and how to better it. So I think that's also a very important thing about like giving it to your peers or your professor, or like in my case, I went to the Writing Center, is to get a second perspective on it, because you might feel like you're doing it correctly, but then someone else can be able to like read it with like a clean plate. I mean, a clean palette. Yeah, a clean palette. So they won't be biased towards it, unlike you yourself, because you know what you're written about. They'll be able to like read it and truly see it for what it is. So to conclude, for the feedback not just being grammar, like I will now provide a better feedback for my peers in the future by focusing on the actual information provided in the essay instead of just improving the grammatical makeup of their essay, which, like I said, Microsoft Word or a quick proofread can easily provide. And also, like for being specific, like my own essay will also improve when using peer feedback that's like more specific, because I will be able to choose specifically what I want help on instead of just handing over my paper blindly to them and giving them no direction.